Hi, I'm Craig Lounsbrough. I want to welcome you to Life Talk. Thanks for joining us today. You know, there are times when the best of our logic fails to understand the worst of others' behaviors. It's part of the oddity, or maybe the complexity of the human psyche, that we sometimes make choices that defy any shred of reason or seem void of even the slightest hint of sensibility. More times than we can count, we stand in awe of the choices that some people make, standing at some distance, shaking our heads in disoriented disbelief and wondering what in the world they were thinking. Sometimes our own choices are perplexingly confusing, defying our own logic and leaving us patently bewildered and entirely befuddled with who we are and what we just did. Clearly, we can be our greatest mystery. Yet the most confounding situations are those when these rather irrational decisions are made at the expense of others. Sure, we can make wildly poor choices that affect others in ways slight or significant. I suppose it's within our rights to chart spurious courses that descend to dark places, as long as the only person that ends up in those dark places with us is us. It would seem that we can shoot ourselves in the foot as long as it's our foot and no one else's. Yet far too frequently, we shoot a lot of other feet than our own. And so the pressing question in my mind becomes, why would we take someone else down with us? What in the world behooves us to make choices that reach out with arms either long or short, grab someone else in whatever way we do that, and drag them down? Why is it that we just can't leave others alone? What compels us to make choices that are certain to seize the course of the life of another and set their path on some dizzying descent? Well, look, when life presses us with an unnerving intensity, we're reflexively prone to revert to a defensive position of what? Self-preservation. Sure, it's quite easy to be gracious and selfless when the cost of doing so isn't all that significant. We can look quite the part when we don't have a lot of skin in the game, or when we know that we're not likely to be skinned while we're in the game. We live within limits that are long on self, but short on others. Therefore, as the cost-benefit analysis swings away from us, we're more likely to gradually, or not so gradually, swing the cost over onto others. We're noble, but we're noble to a point. We're generous, but only to the degree that what we're getting sufficiently offsets what we're giving. We will extend ourselves in ways that appear magnanimous and often philanthropic, as long as we don't have to extend ourselves beyond arm's reach of ourselves. There comes a point where the responsibility of accountability is just a bit too revealing, where the selflessness of putting ourselves aside is pinching our egos a bit too hard, and where the concept of sacrifice and the good of our fellow man hasn't given us all that much in return, if it's given us anything at all. When the world around us doesn't reciprocate our simple acts of simply being a good person in the manner in which that we feel that it should, we become jaded, and we take a darker turn into ourselves. When the world is perceived by us as greedy, when it seems that every action is driven by a covert agenda, and when the rampant selfishness appears wholly and unrepentant and entirely irreparable, we pull inward and we put up impenetrable walls. And in putting up the walls, we would be quite wise to ask if the things that we find so aberrant and awful are indeed the very things that we ourselves have engaged in. It may well be that our own greed is worse than those that we condemn, because we too often demand that we dictate what we give to those that are around us. Now, if we are not aware of such distortions, we will make it about us. And in making it about us, we're foolishly led to believe that all of our many cherished expenditures are never expended because they never move outside of us. It's all about investing all of us back into all of us. This self-sabotaging, self-absorbing cycle creates an ever-hardening pattern where the deepening pain that we're inflicting on others and the manner in which we are diminishing their lives begins to go entirely unnoticed. Often we're on the receiving end of just such behaviors, and sometimes we're often the ones that are actually dishing them out. When we make it about us, someone, somewhere, is going to go down simply because the cost of being about us is a cost that will always extend itself beyond us. We don't have the life currency to make it about us, so we borrow or steal that currency from other places and other people. And despite our frequent arguments to the contrary, we simply do not have the inherent capacity to generate everything that we need. However astounding we might perceive it to be, our capacity to be independently generate resources will perpetually fall short of the resources that, in fact, we actually need. Therefore, as our accumulated needs swiftly exhaust our scant resources, we're forced by our limitations to reach out of ourselves to obtain those resources. And in either borrowing or stealing those resources from someone else, that someone is going down as we attempt to push ourselves up. We've regularly failed to realize that being a good person pays exceedingly generous dividends far beyond anything that we can borrow or steal. Riches born of sacrifice can fill the coffers of heaven. Yet we miss those dividends because they're not exactly the ones that we're looking for, or they've come at some cost when we'd much prefer to receive them free of charge. And so cynicism wins the day, pessimism reigns, and we're going to take others down with us without even recognizing that we're doing that to that person. It's quite sad enough that we do things to take ourselves down and that we shoot ourselves in the foot. Yet it's infinitely more tragic that we do that to others. We cannot control the actions of others as they generate such behaviors upon us. Yet we can control ourselves. So to avoid taking others down, we'd be wise to look at the state of our heart. Take the temperature of our attitude and see if our soul is still breathing. Because we may find that they are all in some state that we'd prefer them not to be. Once we've inventoried them alive again, maybe we'll realize that to sacrifice is to fill the coffers of heaven, which will spill over into the vault of our own soul. I want to thank you for joining us on Life Talk today. You'll find Life Talk on most podcast platforms as well as YouTube. I would also encourage you to check out our daily posts on all of our social media sites, as well as our array of books on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever books are sold. Thanks for being here today. I look forward to seeing you next time. Where in the world am I? What in the world did I do to get here? And given the mess that I'm living in, is there any hope of getting out? There are answers to all of those questions.